I have a lot of friends who were raised Seventh-day Adventist. They were taught to observe the Bible Sabbath from Friday sunset to Saturday sunset, the same Sabbath hours the Jewish people have honored for thousands of years. But for many of them, the Sabbath didn't feel like freedom. It felt heavy, restrictive, like a long list of things they weren't allowed to do. And I don't believe that's because the Sabbath itself is burdensome. I think it's because the Sabbath has often been taught through the wrong lens. Instead of being understood through design law, it's been filtered through imperial law, the kind of rule-based system humans create, where laws are enforced through threat, coercion, and punishment. But God isn't an emperor. God is a creator. Creators don't make arbitrary rules. They build protocols into reality itself. Gravity doesn't punish you for disobedience. If you violate it, you're injured, not penalized. The same is true of God's moral and relational laws. They are design laws, principles life works best within. When we step outside of them, damage occurs and healing is required, not punishment inflicted. This distinction matters deeply when we read the fourth commandment. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Exodus 20:8. We often read this as if God is saying, don't mess this up. But the Hebrew language opens a much richer picture. The word translated as it can also imply self, which gives us a different way of understanding the command. Remember the Sabbath day in order to remain holy. Or remember the Sabbath day. Keep yourself aligned. That changes everything. Because here's an honest question. Can we actually make the Sabbath more holy or less holy? If someone spent the Sabbath hours in cruelty or selfishness, did the Sabbath become unholy? And if someone spent those same hours in love and service, did they make it more holy? Of course not. We didn't create the Sabbath, so we can't alter its holiness. What can be affected is us. Jesus himself said, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath." Mark 2:27. In other words, the Sabbath exists as a gift, a space built into time for human restoration, alignment, and healing. So what is holiness? Holiness isn't perfectionism. It isn't rule-keeping. Holiness is harmony. It's living in harmony with God's character, His ways, His methods, His design. The Sabbath was created during a war. The Sabbath was established at the end of Creation Week, but Scripture tells us something profound was happening in the universe at the same time. And there was war in heaven. Revelation 12:7-9. The Greek word for war here is polemos, a war of ideas, a war over who God is. Jesus said Satan is the father of lies, John 8:44. And Paul makes it clear where this war is actually fought. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, taking every thought captive to Christ. 2 Corinthians 10:3-5. This war has always been about trust, about whether God governs through love or through force. If God wanted loyalty through intimidation, why not crush rebellion instantly? Why not compel obedience? Instead, God does something radical. He creates a day of rest, a day where He stops exerting power, a day of space, a day of freedom, a day that says, think, observe, decide for yourself. Job tells us the universe was watching. When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Job 38:4-7. Earth became evidence. Paul writes, "We have been made a spectacle to the whole universe, to angels as well as to men." 1 Corinthians 4:9. After 6 days of overwhelming creative power, God rests, not because He's tired, but because He's revealing His character. Power does not define Him. Love does. The seventh day is the only day that reveals who God is, not just what He can do. Why the Sabbath conversation is surfacing again. And this is where things get really relevant for our time. Lately, conversations about Sabbath, limits, and rest have resurfaced far beyond church spaces. One example is Stop in the Name of God by Charlie Kirk. What interests me isn't just the book, it's why this conversation is happening right now. Across the political spectrum, across faith traditions, people are exhausted, burned out, spiritually thin, constantly on, So when public voices begin talking about boundaries, restraint, and even invoking God in that conversation, it tells us something important. People are hungry again. Hungry for rest, for meaning, for limits that are actually good for them. That hunger shouldn't be mocked or dismissed. It should be taken seriously. At the same time, this is where discernment really matters. There's a difference between recognizing the need for rest and understanding the design of rest. The Sabbath isn't just a good idea. It isn't a productivity tool. And it isn't something we reinvent based on preference. From a design law perspective, the Sabbath is built into reality itself, into time by the Creator. So when we hear, "We all need a Sabbath," whatever day works for you, it sounds compassionate. But it subtly shifts the conversation from creation to customization. And that shift matters. Because once rest becomes something we define for ourselves rather than something we receive as a gift, we're back to managing life on our own terms. What I do appreciate about this cultural moment is that it's reopening a question many people stopped asking. What does it mean to live within limits that are actually good for us? That question alone is worth wrestling with. Method over calendar. Here's where the Sabbath commandment becomes deeply personal. All week long, we're called to remember the Sabbath, not just the day, but the principles. Do we present truth in love? Do we leave others free? Do we trust that coercion destroys what God is trying to heal? Jesus confronted people who had the correct day but the wrong character. They kept Sabbath and crucified the Lord of the Sabbath. So Sabbath keeping can't simply be about timing. It has to be about alignment. Historically, Sabbath and Sunday stand as symbols of two different systems of governance. The Sabbath points to design law, truth, love, freedom. Sunday became a rest day through human legislation, imperial law. But the day itself is a sign, not the reality. Someone can worship on the right day and still practice coercion. And someone can worship on Sunday and still live out Sabbath principles. God is looking at character, not calendars. The real question. So the real question isn't, what day do you worship on? The real question is, who do you believe God is? A creator whose laws are life-giving protocols built into reality? Or an imperial ruler who enforces obedience through threat? The Sabbath answers that question every 7 days. It's not a test of loyalty. It's an invitation to trust. A reminder woven into time that God governs through love, truth, freedom, and restoration. My invitation to you is simple. Reject the lie that makes God look like a dictator. Embrace the truth that He is a designer. Receive the seventh-day Sabbath, not as a burden, but as a gift, created for human healing, renewal, peace, growth, and joy. And remember it, not just one day a week, but every day, by practicing God's methods, truth presented in love while leaving others free. If this video resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe. This helps others see our content. Thank you.